in Eric Mandel. He's joining us from the United States, the founder and director of the Middle East Political Information Network and senior editor for security at the Jerusalem Report. And Yigal Marcus joining us. Yigal, good to have you back. Director, Republican overseas in Israel. So we'll be getting into some of the perhaps political concerns as well. Eric, I want to come to you first on this. Look, the Iranians have played what is now something familiar to us, their typical negotiating game. Coming out of it saying this meeting was very positive. We've identified areas of potential progress, not actual progress, but enough to perhaps get another round of talks from the White House. This has worked in previous administrations. How long might this delay tactic work this time?
Well, I think we have to first back up why Bibi came over a week early. ALMA, which is a think tank up north that I work with, they just came out today with a report of the 25 key ballistic launch bases that were hit in June 2025. And the report is that they were only made temporarily inoperable. All the underground facilities are intact, and satellite imagery now shows above ground that there's restoration and operational activity. And we can't also forget about the solid fuel production sites. The solid fuel is much more important than the liquid fuel because missiles could be stored with that fuel. They're very hard to detect and they can be fired quickly. So Bibi comes over, his goal, convince Trump to avoid these drawn out negotiations, and at a minimum, get the ability for Israel to have a unilateral strike. And if there's a deal, to limit the deal's concessions. Iran, and they have outplayed us over many, many administrations. They want to delay, they want to get concessions, they want to buy time. Their strategy is first nuclear first, and then they'll say, we'll talk about missiles afterwards. And then what I expect them to do is at the last minute to offer something on missiles, maybe not substantial, but to give the president a win. And then Iran will offer to freeze something on its nuclear program. And that will be in exchange for sanctions relief. And sanctions relief means abandoning the 40,000 protesters who gave their lives. It would save the regime and the proxy network and the ballistic missiles. So I'm worried about how good the 3,000-plus-year-old Persian Bazaar negotiators are compared to my country in being able to outplay them. And the administration has to make a decision. What is its ultimate goal here? And if it has made a decision that regime change is not going to be, it's going to be regime collapse and an IRGC taking over in chaos and whispering in the ears, as Ariel was discussing, whether the Qataris or the Turks or the Omanis and even the UAE saying, don't do anything because it will destabilize the region. There's a lot of pressure on President Trump of what to do.
I want to bring you into this, and also feel free to respond to each other if you feel you need to. That's where I want to draw you in, Yigal. First of all, maybe I'll take you into some of the international, but to look at the pressures on the president, perhaps. It is an election year, midterms. What are the pressures, inside on the president of the United States? He demonstrated loudly in June that he drives MAGA, that he drives international policy. How big are the domestic considerations around just how to deal with Iran in this moment? Are there any constraints?
I think there are two issues. Number one is, you're right, it's an election year, and the last thing the president wants is to be bogged down in a war as the year goes on, which is why he's been sending a lot of material to the region to try and ultimately have a quick, powerful strike that would hopefully end the regime, if that was something that he decided to do. On the other side of it is, he made a statement that help was on its way. What we don't want to happen is Iran to be re-emboldened by them dragging the U.S. to more negotiations, buying time, and then getting something. And then those people, those tens of thousands of people who died, and then hundreds of thousands of people who have been injured, and there are reports that the regime is now going hospital to hospital and shooting injured, bedridden protesters in the head. The minute the president says help's on the way and it doesn't show up, that could be his Afghanistan moment. He doesn't want that. So, yeah, he's being pressured on both sides, and he's going to have to decide, if we want a nuclear-free region and a nuclear-free Iran, there are two ways to do it. You can try to make a deal with a regime that has lied, that has built a huge clandestine, nuclear program, or you can get rid of the regime and hope that the next regime that comes into play will actually not want to bother pursuing a nuclear program because they want to rebuild the country and prosper, which is what the people deserve.
I always argue, and I'm happy to hear pushback on this, that it's hard to imagine in my greatest creativity a sort of worse regime in place than what's going on in Tehran today. Eric, I want to bring this back to you, and I think you agree with the points that Yigal just made there. Is there a necessary loss of face or prestige, deterrence, so important to the United States worldwide right now if Trump balks at any punitive measures? Again, this is a regime that just committed the bloodiest political violence of the 21st century, over 30,000 killed, and instead he makes a deal with them, legitimizes their authority. How dangerous is that?
So let's not get out ahead of ourselves, because I think we've all been surprised about what the president does and doesn't do. But I think if I was going to give one bit of advice right now to the negotiators, to Steve Witkoff and Kushner, I want to read them a quote from one of Khamenei's leading advisors, Mohammad Lajani. He said, quote, "It's Persian wisdom. We don't have to be ideal people. Everybody lies. Let's be good liars." This is Tadiyah. This is religiously approved lying. And so I think you need to know who you're dealing with. And I think that for their ultimate goal, first is regime survival. And the second thing is that they are going to eventually have to be able to be hegemonic again. Remember, they have strategic patience. Patience could be for decades, centuries. We don't have that. So it gets back to your original question. What will this look like if it is perceived that President Trump balked here, that he did not fulfill what he said he would do? Let's just take this, go from 35,000 feet. What's going on right now is being watched in Beijing and Taipei. America's supposed to be going to the Far East. That's where we're going to pivot. If we look like we balked here, the Chinese will become emboldened. The Taiwanese will be frightened. The world will see that clearly. Also, we don't want to abandon, when the president puts a red line out there, and he put a red line very clearly to my ears, that he is not going to abandon the protesters if the Iranians continued their executions and shooting innocent people in the streets. We don't know the real numbers at this point. So I think everybody has used this, but it really makes the point. He does not want to look like President Obama with his red line with chemical weapons with Syria, that he allowed it to go. So I think that's where we're at this point. But I don't think we should jump ahead. We don't know what President Trump is going to do. But I do think sometimes the last person in the room is the one who influences him. And Bibi's been invited into that room 7 times in a year.
Absolutely. Yigal, on that line, we detailed a little bit earlier just about the the sort of the group that's in the president's ear on the other way, and you mentioned this too about not taking action in this moment, to lay off, to give time to the negotiating table. Look, as the director of Republican Overseas in Israel, is there, if you can reveal, a line of open contact with the White House coming from sort of the Republican community in Israel in a way, also helping these sort of lobbying efforts to convince the president that more has to be done?
Yeah, I mean, we're always in communication with the White House and his advisors. Obviously, we're close with his advisors, and there's complexity here that we respect. And we don't want to be warmongers, right, but we also don't want to be dead, and we don't want to have a country.
Yeah, realists.
Right, we're realists, right? Yeah. We don't want to have a country that will forever be under threat from this tyrannical regime. And so, when you think about the legacy, I think the Ambassador Huckabee said it well when he said this is a defining moment in the president's legacy. And I'm not suggesting that he has to attack, but I am suggesting that this is a unique opportunity, the greatest opportunity in the last 50 years for regime change, for ushering in a different option, hopefully one that's liberal, one that's forward thinking, and can help rebuild Iran. And we, the United States, the state of Israel, would be first up to help the population rebuild what they deserve, which is a strong economy, a great country, a proud country, and a country that is not being held back by these religious zealots. And so we're in constant communication. We are trying to lead the president to make decisions that will ultimately not just protect Israel, but really solidify a completely new Middle East, led by the Abraham Accords, led by peace, led hopefully by the Board of Peace that he put together, and not continued having this tyrannical regime continue to hover over the Middle East after what they started on October 7th.
I completely agree. We may face the most acute threat here in Israel from this regime, I guess not compared to the people of Iran, but it's in the interest of the region. I know that we act certainly not as warmongers or seeking that kind of thing. The region can be a better place. Yigal Marcus and Eric Mandel, thanks for being with us on this important topic.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.